A devastating institutional betrayal is unfolding across South Africa tonight. Over 600,000 impoverished students promised that education would be their weapon against poverty have been cast into freezing corrugated iron shanties without running water or internet, while university administrators and tender syndicates profit from their desperation. But the silence has officially broken. In eThekwini, Julius Malema delivered a thunderous indictment against the governing establishment, declaring that after barely 13 years, the economic freedom fighters have exposed 30 years of administrative decay, state corruption, and broken promises. This is not ordinary political posturing. This is a seismic reckoning that strikes at the unresolved core of the entire nation. If power changes hands, but not structure, has anything really changed? Do not look away. What you are about to witness exposes the raw, unvarnished truth behind the struggle for the nation's future. If you value fearless, uncompromising political documentary, take a stand with us, hit the like button, leave your perspective below, and subscribe to South African Dynamics right now to ensure these critical truths are never silenced. The crisis across South Africa's higher education system is not an accidental administrative failure, it is a structural assault on the working class. Across the Republic, more than 600,000 young men and women enter public universities and vocational training colleges, carrying the fierce ambition to break generational poverty. Instead, they are met with an institutional wall designed to exclude them before their journey even begins. Consider the cruel paradox engineered by the state apparatus. For 12 consecutive years, a child attends a no-fee public school because the government officially acknowledges that their household possesses nothing. For over a decade, their poverty is documented, recognized, and accommodated. Yet the moment that same young person passes their final matriculation examinations, the state abruptly behaves as though that certificate miraculously produced wealth. They arrive at the university gates, where institutional gatekeepers immediately demand upfront registration fees. Where is an unemployed mother or a fatherless household supposed to find thousands of rand overnight? Nothing in their material reality has changed. The roof still leaks at home, the family cupboards remain bare, yet the system suddenly demands cash before opening the lecture halls. Those fortunate enough to secure admission face an even more harrowing trial when seeking shelter. Inside, campus residences are routinely declared full, and vulnerable teenagers are systematically channeled into unregulated off-campus accommodation. Through lucrative networks between university administrators and private landlord, students are dispatched into informal settlements, forced to live inside cramped corrugated iron shacks, masquerading as approved student housing. In these tin rooms, there is no running water, no sanitation, and absolutely no internet connectivity. Modern higher education does not operate on an 8-hour schedule. Genuine scholarship requires 24 hours of continuous access to digital research, scientific journals, and global knowledge networks. Instead, these young minds are cast into complete intellectual isolation the moment the sun sets, able to access information only when they return to campus grounds the following day. The physical conditions inside these settlements are an outright assault on human dignity. When the winter rains descend upon the coastal settlements and Highveld Township's water pours directly through rusted roofs, soaking textbooks, mattresses, and examination notes. When the temperatures plummet, the uninsulated metal shanties turn into ice boxes. Instead of fighting to master complex academic disciplines, the sons and daughters of ordinary workers are forced to fight the physical elements. They were admitted because the institutions examined their academic records and verified their intellect. Yet when exhaustion and impossible living conditions inevitably damage examination performance, the administration coldly enforces the rule of academic exclusion, declaring that these students lack the capacity to succeed. They were sent to universities to become researchers, engineers, and scholars, not to serve as frontline rain fighters battling flooded floors. Even more grotesque is the culture of exploitation that festers under the shadow of this institutional abandonment. In the absence of rigorous accountability, certain corrupt lecturers exploit this extreme vulnerability, demanding sexual favors from desperate students in exchange for passing marks. It is a repulsive distortion of academic authority. These students already possess brilliant minds. Their intellect does not depend on submitting to the predatory whims of compromised educators. To reduce academic merit to extortion is an unforgivable betrayal of the historical promise of education as a tool of liberation. Yet the deliberate abandonment of university students in squalid shacks is not an isolated malfunction of the academic sector. It is merely the opening chapter of a far wider collapse of civic governance, where the basic essentials of human survival are systematically denied to millions across the country's most vital metropolitan centers. If the abandonment of students in squalid shanties exposes the moral decay within higher education, the collapse of basic municipal infrastructure across the coastal metropolis of eThekwini reveals an administrative machinery in complete paralysis. In historic townships such as Umlazi and Kwamashu, the simple act of turning on a household tap has become a distant memory for hundreds of thousands of working families. Instead of clean, pressurized water flowing directly into domestic yards, entire communities are subjected to the degrading ritual of the daily queue. From before dawn, an elderly grandmother's mothers and school-age children stand in long, exhausting lines on dusty pavements, clutching plastic buckets waiting for municipal relief that arrives erratically, if at all. When the emergency distribution vehicles finally appear local, residents are told that each household is restricted to a single bucket. This is not merely an inconvenience, it is a calculated display of structural indignity forced upon citizens who have paid rates and municipal taxes for generations. The tragedy of this crisis lies in the fact that it is entirely manufactured. Decades ago, reticulation networks in these working-class sectors were fully operational. The municipal obligation was straightforward: maintain existing pipelines, replace aged valves, and expand reticulation grids to unserviced areas. Instead, critical infrastructure was deliberately left to deteriorate, allowing over 45% of treated drinking water to vanish into the ground through unaddressed leaks. In the void created by municipal incompetence, a deeply entrenched and predatory shadow economy has flourished. Highly organized private water tanker syndicates now capture lucrative municipal contracts running into hundreds of millions of rand. These contractors have every financial incentive to ensure that permanent municipal pipes remain broken, because every dry tap guarantees another paid tanker route. The basic human right to water enshrined within the nation's supreme constitution has been commodified, captured and converted into private profit at the direct expense of the poor. Parallel to the water crisis is the environmental and economic catastrophe unfolding along the eastern coastline. Across the beachfronts of Durban, broken municipal pump stations and fractured main lines have discharged millions of liters of untreated raw sewage directly into the Indian Ocean. Levels of deadly bacteria soared past international safety thresholds, closing world-famous beaches, crippling the coastal tourism economy, and destroying the livelihoods of hospitality workers and small business owners. Rather than implementing comprehensive engineering overhauls, high-ranking executive officials staged bizarre performative site inspections, walking along the shoreline with television cameras to gaze upon effluent pipes pouring waste into the sea. An administration that truly comprehended urban governance would not require photo opportunities to understand that a broken sewer line demands emergency engineering, not theatrical gestures. What enrages the population most is the staggering disconnect between daily squalor and elite political fantasy. While public swimming pools remain derelict, while raw effluent floods the streets of Alexandra and Diepsloot, and while informal settlements sink into seasonal mud, government leaders mount public podiums to announce multi-billion rand projects for futuristic mega-cities and high-speed bullet trains linking metropolitan hubs. To promise bullet trains to a population that lacks flushing toilets is an insult to public intelligence. A state that cannot fix a broken pipe in Umlazi possesses neither the technical competence nor the moral credibility to construct an automated metropolis. Governance is measured by the execution of fundamentals, not promises, not speeches, policy. When basic survival is turned into private merchandise, and administrative failure is dressed up as visionary ambition, a fundamental political rupture becomes inevitable. How did a liberation movement that once commanded the moral authority of the continent transform into an apparatus that profits from the thirst of its own people? The widening fault lines within South African governance are nowhere more evident than in the fierce contest between established liberation hierarchies and insurgent political forces. To comprehend the magnitude of this confrontation, one must place the historical trajectory into sharp analytical perspective. When the governing party was founded in 1912, it required 82 years of arduous underground struggle, international mobilization, and domestic resistance before it finally ascended to national power in 1994. In contrast, the economic freedom fighters founded barely 13 years ago in 2013 achieved an unprecedented pace of institutional consolidation. Within a single decade, the movement transformed from an expelled youth faction into the definitive agenda setter of national politics, securing decisive positions on mayoral committees and overseeing multi-billion rand municipal budgets across the nation's key economic engines, Johannesburg, Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, and Nelson Mandela Bay. This meteoric rise represents a fundamental restructuring of post-apartheid political gravity. This extraordinary institutional velocity is precisely why the recent Julius Malema speech resonated so powerfully across the political landscape, framing the ideological clash of ANC versus EFF not merely as a routine electoral contest, but as a structural battle of organizational integrity against administrative decay. Central to this argument is the stark dividing line between integrity versus corruption. For over a decade, political opponents and judicial inquiries have subjected the Red Beret leadership to intense public scrutiny, attempting to equate their radical rhetoric with financial malfeasance. Yet, while senior figures within the established ruling elite have been repeatedly embroiled in high-profile state capture scandals and private financial improprieties, where tens of thousands of foreign dollars were discovered, hidden beneath domestic furniture, not a single municipal councillor from the opposition front has been formally convicted of plundering the public purse. Councillors who were dismissed from public office, particularly across the fiercely contested terrain of KwaZulu-Natal, were disciplined solely for failing to execute organizational mandates and serving their communities, not for stealing from the impoverished masses. Nowhere is the human cost of political factionalism more visible and lethal than in KwaZulu-Natal, where local governance has repeatedly descended into a theatre of targeted assassinations. Over the course of recent electoral cycles, dozens of local councillors, community organisers, and municipal candidates have been gunned down in premeditated hits, their lives extinguished over access to municipal tenders and political salaries. These violent confrontations, frequently originating from internal disputes within established ruling networks, where factions resolve nomination rivalries with weapons rather than votes, represent a catastrophic breakdown of political morality. In direct opposition to this violent culture, genuine revolutionary discipline demands that political disagreements never be resolved through the barrel of a gun. If a candidate is overlooked or an administrative post reassigned, the cadre accepts the decision with political maturity, understanding that true historical legitimacy belongs to the collective movement rather than individual ambition. Take a moment right here to tell us in the comments where you are watching from your city, your country, your corner of the globe. South African Dynamics wishes to express our deepest gratitude to each of you, and we send our most sincere blessing. May your path be guided by unwavering dignity, resilience, and light. Your thoughts below form a worldwide bridge of conscious voices. How long can any political establishment maintain constitutional legitimacy when governance is reduced to patronage and democratic competition is settled in blood? The deepening crisis of municipal leadership has shattered the illusion of perpetual incumbency, proving that an organized, disciplined vanguard can rapidly dismantle decades of political complacency. Yet as this internal power struggle intensifies across municipal council chambers and township streets, the tremors are reverberating far beyond national borders. How are international diplomatic missions, Western trade partners, and multilateral financial institutions interpreting this historic realignment across Africa's most strategic industrial powerhouse? To global observers and foreign policy analysts in Washington, London, and Brussels, the deepening fractures across South Africa are not viewed as isolated municipal friction, but as a systemic geopolitical vulnerability. As the continent's most sophisticated industrialized economy, South Africa commands critical maritime corridors and international supply chains. At the epicenter of this international concern lies the strategic port of Durban, the premier maritime gateway handling over 60% of containerized trade for southern Africa. When the escalating eThekwini service crisis cripples basic infrastructure, contaminates marine environments, and disrupts freight logistics, the economic repercussions reverberate through global commodities markets and regional trade agreements. International investors and multilateral development institutions increasingly recognize that physical supply chains cannot remain resilient when municipal governance in port cities collapses under administrative inertia and tender manipulation. This reality has sharpened diplomatic scrutiny over the broader South Africa political crisis. International reporting from the World Bank and multilateral development bodies has consistently highlighted that the Republic remains burdened by the highest Gini coefficient of wealth inequality on the planet. For decades, foreign policy establishments operated under the assumption that cosmetic political transitions would naturally produce social cohesion. That diplomatic consensus has now shattered. When Malema slams ANC leadership for presiding over 3 decades of unfulfilled constitutional promises, international analysts observe that this critique reflects the boiling frustration of an entire generation locked out of economic participation. The global community is no longer watching a standard parliamentary debate. It is watching the historic clash between silence versus voice, between decades of diplomatic silence over institutional decay and the uncompromising voice of a dispossessed majority demanding economic sovereignty. From the corridors of the African Union in Addis Ababa to diplomatic desks across the United States, policymakers recognize that the stability of the entire region depends upon whether South Africa can achieve structural economic justice without sliding into administrative breakdown. Cosmetic coalition pacts and elite compromises cannot indefinitely paper over failing water grids, unlit informal settlements, and millions of disenfranchised youths. The geopolitical stakes could not be higher. Yet, as international pressure mounts and global capital demands accountability, the central question turns back to the domestic arena, who possesses the political stamina and grassroots discipline to lead this transformation on the ground. The roadmap towards genuine transformation cannot be separated from the historical memory of South Africa's hardest-fought battles. In 1976, when courageous schoolchildren in Soweto stood against live ammunition, armed only with stones and unyielding conviction, they permanently redefined the horizon of political liberation. Today, on the streets of eThekwini, and throughout the Republic's forgotten townships, a second and equally decisive struggle has begun: the transition from nominal political franchise to total economic emancipation. This generational transition demands leaders whose political spine was forged in the trenches of mass struggle, not within the air-conditioned comfort of corporate boardrooms. Central to this transformative vision is the profound elevation of women into executive governance. For decades, traditional patriarchal hierarchies systematically marginalized revolutionary matriarchs, exemplified by the deliberate isolation of Winnie Madikizela Mandela at Mafikeng. Despite systemic betrayal, her unyielding dedication proved that historical truth ultimately outlasts political malice. Drawing directly from that unbreakable heritage, the economic freedom fighters have broken conventional political norms by entrusting mayoral candidacies across major metropolitan centers, including Johannesburg, Tshwane Ekurhuleni, and eThekwini, to seasoned, disciplined women leaders. Entrusting multi-billion rand municipal budgets to women who have spent lifetimes defending their communities is not a symbolic gesture. It is a fundamental reconfiguration of public administration. For these leaders, the seat of power is neither an instrument of personal enrichment nor an ornamental throne, but a direct mechanism to restore clean running water, reliable electricity, and human dignity to millions of neglected households. This political offensive is carried out through relentless grassroots mobilization, building coalitions door to door, factory by factory, and campus by campus. It unites university students battling squalor with municipal laborers fighting for fair wages, proving that collective discipline can overcome the deepest institutional entrenchments. As we stand at the edge of this political crossroads, remember that history is not merely observed. It is shaped by those who dare to seek the truth. If this investigative breakdown has enriched your understanding of South Africa's decisive battlegrounds, subscribe to South African Dynamics right now. By subscribing, you ensure that uncompromising analyses of sovereignty and accountability continue to be heard across the world. Yet as the rhetoric echoes across packed stadiums and the red banners surge forward, an enduring structural question remains to be answered. In the quiet of the voting booth, can a movement born in the fires of youth, defiance, finally dismantle the economic architecture of exclusion? The political confrontation unfolding across KwaZulu-Natal and the broader republic is far more than a routine electoral struggle for municipal governance. It is a profound reckoning over human dignity and institutional accountability. For over 3 decades, millions of citizens have dutifully cast their ballots, enduring the daily indignities of water shortages, broken infrastructure, and collapsing classrooms, while waiting for the economic freedom they were guaranteed. That generational patience has fundamentally expired. This decisive moment was captured with unvarnished clarity in the recent Julius Malema speech, which laid bare the growing chasm between 30 years of ruling party inertia and an impatient generation demanding structural transformation. When Malema slams ANC governance for reducing public administration to patronage and broken promises, he articulates the unresolved contradiction at the very core of the post-apartheid experiment. If a nation has the vote, but not the voice, is it truly a democracy? The emergence of an organized, uncompromising vanguard proves that the established political consensus is crumbling. True transformation cannot be achieved through cosmetic administrative reshuffles or empty slogans crafted in fortified boardrooms. What the working-class majority demands is clear, not reform, not rhetoric, accountability. As the red banners sweep through the historic heartlands of the country, the message echoing from every township street and university gate is unmistakable. The enduring significance of this Julius Malema speech lies not merely in its fiery delivery, but in its historic call for an active citizenry to reclaim their destiny, dismantle the apparatus of economic exclusion, and build a republic founded on genuine justice and sovereignty. The era of passive waiting has ended. The battle for South Africa's future has begun.